Imagine the pain of losing someone you love and believing that you will never see that person again. Now, imagine living with that pain every single day for 20 years until one day that person knocks on your door. Alive. Claire Johnson lived through the nightmare of war without ever knowing the truth. Her husband, Daniel, was declared dead in battle. She and her son, Mark, went on with their lives, carrying his absence like a constant shadow, until the day everything changed. But what Claire didn't know was that Daniel never died. And when a stranger knocked on her door, 20 years later, her life and her son's life would never be the same again. Daniel's departure to war was a turning point in Claire's life. He wasn't just her husband, but the person with whom she had built all her dreams. They had a life planned, and war, to Claire, seemed like something distant, until it became the reason for their separation. When Daniel left, Mark was only 7 years old. He was a boy who felt the warmth of his father's embrace and, suddenly, found himself lost in longing. Father's Day, birthdays, Christmas, for Mark, everything seemed incomplete. He grew up wishing his father would come back, but every day without him only deepened the emptiness in his heart. Claire, in turn, waited anxiously for news, for any sign that he was okay, that he would return home. Hope was always there, hidden in her thoughts. She remembered how he kissed her before leaving, promising to return soon, but war stole the future she had imagined. Then came the letter. Your husband has been declared dead in action. A cold, impersonal letter that turned Claire's world into an unbearable reality. The impact of the letter was devastating. Claire was silent for days, trying to absorb what seemed impossible. Daniel, her great love, was now only a memory, a distant dream. Mark, who grew up hearing stories of his father, the hero who died fighting for the country, didn't know how to deal with the absence. To him, his father was an idealized image, a figure of strength and courage. But the emptiness was always there, present in every celebration, in every important moment of his life. He missed his father's presence, but he also felt a painful longing for something he had never known. It was as if Mark was shaped by a lie, his father as a hero, his father as the great sacrifice of war. And Claire, well, she was living with the pain of a loss that no one else could understand. And then something impossible happened. One ordinary afternoon, like so many others, Claire heard a knock at the door. It wasn't just any knock, it felt like a knock from destiny. She approached slowly, her heart racing, and when she opened the door, she saw a man who looked like someone she knew. It was Ethan Brooks, a stranger, but with a gaze that seemed to carry the weight of the past. He looked into Claire's eyes and said, without hesitation, I knew Daniel. He's alive. Ethan's words cut through the air. How? How could Daniel be alive after all these years? After the letter, after the morning? Claire was paralyzed. She didn't want to believe it, but a part of her, the part that never gave up hope, began to question. And Ethan had proof. Proof that could destroy everything Claire and Mark had believed up until that moment. The truth was more brutal than any pain Claire could have imagined. Daniel hadn't died in the war. He had been captured. And it was an infernal captivity, not for days, but for years. Years of torture, suffering, destruction. He was broken, marked by the pain of a war that never ended. When he was finally rescued, he was no longer the man Claire had loved. He had been lost to the war, lost to himself. He no longer had the strength to be the strong man she remembered. The love Claire once knew was now a distant echo, something he could no longer offer. And then came the truth for Mark. The war hero, the father he had imagined to be perfect, had been destroyed by the very battle. Mark had to cope with the pain of discovering that his father wasn't who he had believed. But what hurt even more was the fact that, now, he could hardly recognize the man his mother claimed was his father. Claire was faced with an impossible choice. She looked at Mark, who now knew the truth. The hero had shattered, and what remained was a broken man, incapable of being the husband and father he once was. She knew that, no matter how much love still remained, The man she had loved had changed forever. The pain of having waited so long for him, and the pain of seeing how much he had been lost to the war. How could she accept a man who was no longer who she remembered? Mark, with his heart full of longing, didn't know if he could accept his father back. The man he had idealized as a hero was now a shadow, something irrecoverable. He too had to make a choice. Could he accept this broken man as his father, or would the father he had dreamed of remain only in his mind? Claire, with a broken heart, understood that true courage wasn't in fighting to recover the past, but in letting the past go. The love she felt for Daniel hadn't disappeared, but she knew some wounds were too deep to heal. She made a difficult choice. She decided to look to the future, despite all the scars the past had left. And Mark, with all his suffering, also had to find his own way of dealing with the pain. What would he choose? Accept the broken reality of his father, or move on, carrying the memory of an idealized hero? The greatest mystery of life isn't in the choices we make, but in the forces that drive us to make those choices. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage is letting love go, even when it still lives in your heart. And you, what would you do in Claire or Mark's place? Have you ever faced such a difficult choice? Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like the video if this story moved you, and subscribe for more stories that will touch your heart. See you in the next video, and remember, every choice shapes our destiny.